think about, this is, a lot of people here are kind of in the medical community, and I think about when I was back in the Air Force, and you can say what you want about Air Force doctors, and I'll probably believe you. But there was and this is purely an example of anecdotal whatever, but it was my experience, and so it was important to me. It may not be important to a study, but I had a problem one time with my foot where it was going numb. I was like, okay, this is really odd, why can I not feel the arch of my foot? Went to the doctor immediately said he couldn't figure out what, wanted to send me a neurologist and suggested they were probably going to have to do exploratory surgery. I'm thinking, you're crazy, right? My foot's numb and you're immediately telling me you're going to do exploratory surgery. So, fortunately I wasn't ordered to do anything. But I also, and I have I don't have any close friends that are chiropractors. I don't see a chiropractor. I have in the past, but I don't, I've got no axe to grind for or against chiropractic. But I went and, I want to see what a chiropractor's got to say about this. I spent $25. I got an adjustment, but he also said, you might want to consider trying rolling your foot against a tennis ball, the arch of your foot, to strengthen the arch muscles. Couple weeks of that, and it was gone. So I think it's part of what you said. You had some, I think there may be some chiropractors who know something about something.
I had a chiropractor adjust my hip, and I know it made a difference. Like, maybe it was just all in my head because it made a sound, and I was like, hey, I'm better. I don't care! It only cost me $25. I mean,
the biggest concern on the biggest thing I thought was important to communicate, about the whole rhetoric thing. Mm-hmm. It's just as easy to be dismissive on the other side as it is on another, and I think that's really the danger. And me personally, I don't care. It's like you said. I don't care what anybody thinks if I haven't thought it for myself. Meaning, I don't want to have come up with the idea. But if I can't see the value in this, and see the progression, and see the logic, and see the history, then you can say all you want to say. But I'm not going to just take your side, whatever the side is. Do you know what I mean?
Betsy was talking about it's Betsy. I didn't want to know if it's Betty or Betsy.
Whichever, I'm used to all of them.
You were talking about the rhetoric, and I think that one of the things that we again here are to some extent preaching to the choir. One of the things that we do is we throw the term science around a lot, and I consider myself to be a scientist practitioner. I think most of us here either consider themselves scientists or science practitioners, or are very interested in the nature of science. However, on your presentation, the essence of what we're talking about is not science, it's critical thinking. And I think if we, I've thought about this, I have some relatives who are fanatical about certain things. If I bring up science, that shuts them down immediately. But if I just talk about what we know and how we know what we know, I'm talking about science, I just don't use the word. There's a large population out there for whom the rhetoric of science makes them uncomfortable, whereas as the information wouldn't necessarily do so. They accuse us of scientism.
Well, it's because, and I did this crazy thing when I went to college. I have both a degree in English and a degree in biology, and you can't read 500 pages into a 3-hour lab on the same night, by the way, so I got C's.
But he did pay his money and he got his degree.
And tell us what university this was again.
But I would literally leave genetics and go over to a class in the Romantic movement, and I can remember this from my second year. And the thing that was stark about the two different camps is that the people in the Romantic movement were convinced that what I was learning in genetics was like Japanese. Like there was no possible way they could ever understand it. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because I'm sitting here getting right with you on this Romantic movement stuff, and we're all talking about the same poetry, and we're all having a great discussion, and I can walk back every genetics class and completely understand what's going on there, and I don't have a problem with it. You just, somewhere along the line, someone tricked you into believing it's hard. You know, the perfect example in my mind is math. I think a lot of times people are just fooled. They look at a math problem and they just go, "What?" You know what I mean? They're just fooled by it. And I'm convinced. And I have a difficult. I know that math is not my strong suit, and it's something that's difficult. I also realize because I had a series of bad teachers and bad, and bad instances with it. And some days I'm like, I just want to go back and get a degree in physics for the fun of it now, just to prove to myself that I can do it. But I'm quite sure that if I applied myself to it, it may not be like learning to bake a cake, but you can do it. And that's why I think a lot of people are just fooled that it's impossible to understand.
Well, we've got a society now and I think that there's a danger in science for all the good of specialization, that we've got a society that forces so much specialization so early,
Yeah.
you never have a chance to actually understand the range of, like what you were talking about, genetics and romantic poetry, or romantic literature, whatever. You have to have a broad enough awareness of enough fields, in my belief system, to be able to make a judgment based on, well, okay, I have an understanding of this, but how does that really apply over here? Or how does that really apply in this area? Or how do I make a decision based on this? And how do I know who to believe?
What's amazing is people don't, I remember I was sitting in Bonnie class one time and he had just made a slide up with a still pretty much living plant cell. And we're watching the cytoplasmic movement, they all go around in a circle. And I'm sitting there going, that's the coolest thing ever. I'm like looking at this big, because they're up on the TV, and we're looking at this thing, I'm like, what more? And I just think that if I could have brought my romantic poetry friends into the room at that time, I said, check this out. I was looking
Now
at
write a poem about it.
I have poetry.
Ode to cytoplasm.
I think Stephen is trying to adjust toward the door, unless I'm misreading your cues, but I want to go out on a joke, if I may.
Sure.
Because we were talking anti-Semitic a little bit, and you made this symbol, right? Now, everybody knows that there are Christian vampires, right? If you go like that, you can run away. You escape. Did you know there are Jewish vampires? Nobody ever escapes a Jewish vampire attack. You know how long it takes to make a Stargate?
Well, I'm going to say a couple quick here. Thank you all very much for coming. This has been a good night, good discussion, very good discussion. So our next meeting will be in January. Look on the blog. I'm putting the dates on. Dr. Darrell Williams will be talking about science and spirituality. So that should be interesting. And we'll get out the thing about the dues, and y'all come back, you hear?
We will.